The village of Okija was cursed with silence. People lived, farmed, and worshipped, but as soon as the sun dipped below the horizon, an unnatural stillness settled over the land. Generations had whispered of things lurking in the dark, ritualists, spirits, men who traded souls for wealth. But in a country where survival came before superstition, fear was something the people learned to swallow. Nnamdi had never believed in any of it. He was a university student in Lagos, a city where people chased dreams, not ghosts. But when Christmas came, he returned home to visit his aging mother. He hadn't been back in years, and though nostalgia pulled at him, something about the village felt wrong. The people were more withdrawn than he remembered. A strange tension clung to the air. And then, Chukwudi, his friend, disappeared. Chukwudi was Nnamdi's childhood friend, a bright young man who had never planned to stay in Okija. He had dreams of traveling abroad, of escaping the village's suffocating traditions. But one evening, he stepped out to buy something from the market and never came back. At first, no one seemed too alarmed. People went missing sometimes, especially in villages where poverty made young men easy prey for human traffickers. But Nnamdi sensed something else. Chukwudi's mother was crying inconsolable. Her husband looking at her, refusing to speak. And the villagers, they avoided his name, as though speaking it might summon something terrible. Determined to find his friend, Nnamdi began asking questions. He visited the local police station, but the officers chased him out. If he was taken, what do you want us to do? These things happen. Nnamdi didn't stop. He visited old haunts, Chukwudi's favorite drinking spot, the market stalls, the quiet stream where they had fished as boys. But the more he searched, the colder the village became toward him. People stopped meeting his eyes. Doors shut when he passed. It was as if he was walking into a forbidden place, one where he did not belong. Then, one night, an old woman stopped him on the road. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Leave this alone, boy," she said. "Chukwudi is gone. He belongs to them now." Nnamdi's stomach tightened. "Who?" She glanced around, her hands trembling. "The ones who own this land. The ones who take." And just like that, she walked away. That night, Nnamdi couldn't sleep. His heart pounded as he replayed the woman's words. He decided that if no one would help him, he would find out the truth himself. He waited until midnight, then slipped out of his house. The village was deathly quiet. Even the crickets had gone still. Guided only by moonlight, Nnamdi followed the dirt path toward the sacred forest, a place elders had always warned them about as children. He had heard rumors of strange gatherings there, men in red robes, blood oaths, missing people. As he neared the trees, he heard voices. Chanting. Low, rhythmic, and chilling. He crouched behind a bush, his breath shallow. Then, he saw them. A group of men, dressed in flowing red robes, moved in a slow circle around a massive shrine. At the center of the shrine lay Chukwudi. His hands and feet were tied, his mouth gagged, his eyes wild with terror. An elder, his face covered in white markings, raised a curved blade over his body. Nnamdi's blood turned to ice. Chukwudi struggled violently, but the men held him down. The elder chanted louder, his voice echoing through the trees. The blade gleamed in the moonlight. Nnamdi had seconds to decide, watch his friend die or risk everything to stop it. Without thinking, he picked up a stone and hurled it toward the group. It crashed against the shrine, the sound splitting the night like a gunshot. The ritualists froze. Their heads snapped in his direction. Nnamdi didn't wait. He sprinted through the forest, branches slashing his face, his heart hammering in his chest. Behind him, footsteps thundered. Voices called out. They were chasing him. He tripped, crashing to the ground. A hand closed around his ankle. Nnamdi kicked wildly, breaking free. He ran, lungs burning, until he saw the flickering lights of the village. He burst into the square, screaming for help. People woke. Doors opened. And then, the ritualists stopped. They melted back into the darkness, their presence vanishing like smoke. The villagers gathered, murmuring. But no one asked questions. They knew. That night, Chukwudi's body was never found. The shrine was gone. And the men in red robes. They blended back into the crowd, just ordinary villagers by day. The next morning, Nnamdi's mother told him to leave. Her voice shook as she packed his bags. You have seen what you should not see. Go, my son. Go and never return. As he waited for the bus, an old man approached. He was one of the elders, one of them. He smiled. You think you did something last night? His voice was soft, almost amused. Boy, you only delayed what must happen. The gods always take their due. Nnamdi's fingers curled into fists. He wanted to scream. To fight. But deep down, he knew this was bigger than him. Bigger than justice. As the bus pulled away, he saw the village shrink behind him. And in the shadows of the trees, a figure in red watched him go. Years passed. Nnamdi never spoke of what happened in Okija. He built a life in the city, far away from the whispers of his past. But some nights, in the quiet of his apartment, he would wake up to the sound of chanting. He had learned a painful truth: evil thrives where silence prevails. The people of Okija knew what was happening but did nothing. They feared too much, and their fear became complicity. Nnamdi knew that change could only come when people spoke up. When they resisted. When they refused to turn a blind eye to the horrors hidden in the shadows. He could have run from it. He could have buried it. But instead, he chose to fight, not with weapons, but with the truth. He became a journalist, exposing the underground networks of ritualists across Nigeria. He told the stories that no one wanted to hear and published newspapers. And though threats followed him, he did not stop. Because he understood something now: the only way to end evil is to shine a light on it. As years gone by, the peace in the village was restored, and the people lived without fear of being killed or missing children. The villagers were in jubilation.